So now we're ready to get down to some actual creative use of this gradient. We've painstakingly generated a pure linear gradient. We've generated it at enough of a bit depth to give us a smooth result. And now we're going to come over to this layer and we're going to apply our chief modeling tool, which is the curves command. Let's give ourselves a little bit more room to work by collapsing down the 3D panel, which we're not going to use just yet. And coming over to our layout pop-up and re-choosing 2 up, and that moves things around just a little bit so that we can see them a bit more clearly. Now let's come back over to our layer 2, come down and apply adjustment layer curves. And because we need as much visibility of the curve as we can possibly get, I'm going to click on this icon to switch the panel to expanded mode, which is going to make it a little bit bigger so that we can really see what we're doing. We're going to be adjusting the shape of the curve, which will, because we've gone through all these steps, which will directly affect the shape of our cone. Now, in order to visualize this properly, it'll help, in our case, to identify where the white pixels on our gradient correspond with the gradient that we see at the bottom of our curves interface. And since the white pixels are on the left and the black pixels are on the right, it will help you to visualize the results by sort of turning your head sideways a little bit and imagining that this is the bottom of the profile, that this is the point of the profile. It's where we get to the black pixels. It represents the point. White pixels down here represent the edge of our cone. And if we adjust the intermediate curve, and click back over, the end result is a gentle curve that corresponds pretty precisely to the curve that we just drew. If we come back over, you can start to have real creative fun with this. All sorts of wacky, interesting profiles will come right over and allow you to model fairly interactively some pretty wacky, interesting shapes. Now, in our case, we want to use this to generate the top of our goblet. So let's come back. Let's delete some of these points just by dragging them off the interface. And the first thing we want to do is invert our cone. And the easiest way for us to do it now is just invert our curve. Come back over, and you'll see the results. Now, before we go any further, let's take a quick glance once more at Bridge. See the shape that we're trying to create. It's sort of a gentle curve, and then this little bumpy finial. That's what we're going to try to create with this first piece, which we're going to call cup. So we're going to make that. We jump back over into Photoshop. And now if we switch back over to our grayscale layer, now don't be confused here. You still have to turn your head a little bit to the right to realize that this still represents the base at this end. So we want to fatten up our base. Let's pull this curve here. The automatic smoothing of curves can give you fits, so you just have to keep adding extra points sometimes to get things to work the way that you want them to. Now let's click and add a gentle curve. We don't want to go so far that we end up with a straight line along the edge here, or that's going to end up clipping the results, which we don't want to do. We'd have a straight line there. If you check the reference image again, you'll see that it sort of gently slopes up all the way to the end, and it doesn't double back on itself either. Although we could do that if we wanted to by just having the curve shape like this, and that would allow us to create a goblet that does double back, but the one that we're trying to model doesn't. So let's see where we are here. Let's add one more point here just to make this as straight as possible. And let's check our results, see where we are. Well, it's not bad. It's not bad at all. There is a little bit of a ridge that's missing around this finial, and I think the scale may be just a little bit off in terms of the base portion here being a little taller than it might need to be. So let's go back. Once again, this is a very interactive process. If we shorten up our base, pull these curves down. Now we need to add some points in here to give ourselves a little bit more detail. But we need to be very, very careful how we accomplish that. one of the most challenging parts of working with curves deals with lots of points like this. You end up having to essentially add a point a distance away from some other points and then move it towards it. And that you can get away with. But you can't just, once you've got a certain density of points, it becomes very difficult to add more. And if you start moving around the control points that are close to each other, if they get too close, they'll just flat out disappear. You can see in this case, this one disappears if I try to drag it any further to the right. So we're going to leave it there. Now, you might be tempted at this point, if you know about curves, to switch over to the pencil mode in order to fine-tune effects like this. And that's a reasonable thing to expect to do. But I warn you, if you do switch over to pencil mode, the end result of smooth curves like this are going to be very jaggy. We can do it pretty quickly here. Switch over to pencil mode. Without touching anything else, come over and look at our chalice. And while you can see the finial base looks pretty good, you'll notice that our smoothness that we gained from going to 16-bit grayscale has been lost, and we're now left with this grooved result that is the direct result of the imprecision of the pencil tool. So let's go back. Unfortunately, this is something we can pretty easily reverse because we haven't made any subsequent changes to the points. And let's see what our results look like by using the curves instead of the pencil. Very nice, very smooth. The grooves have gone away, and we now have an element that I'm pretty satisfied to call the top of our chalice. Looks pretty nice. This would be a good time to come over to our layer menu. Let's call this cup. And after all this work, let's save our document. I'm going to place our saved document into the 3D modeling folder inside my Chapter 2 folder. And I'm going to call this My Chalice. I encourage you to do the same and click Save. Maximize compatibility, that's fine, and click OK.